Trapped by my husband in prison for 2 years because of his mistress, watch how I got my revenge and turned them into homeless drifters on the very day of my release. The cell walls were damp, smelling of a mixture of old concrete, dried sweat, and rotting hope. Yet for Zariah, that wall was a giant calendar. With the tip of her thumbnail, rough and slightly chipped, she traced a small vertical line near the leg of her iron cot. The line was almost invisible if you didn't look closely, but for Zariah, it was a tiny sign of victory. 729 days. Tomorrow would be day 730, the day of her release. Zariah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the stale air of the women's correctional facility. She sat cross-legged on the thin mattress that had been her home for the last 2 years. Before this, she slept in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, in a luxurious villa in Silver Lake Estates, the most exclusive black neighborhood in the city. Before, she was the wife of Cyprian Mercer, an up-and-coming real estate mogul. Now, she was just inmate number 304. The memory washed over her like an unstoppable tide. The flashes of the reporters' cameras at the courthouse, the condescending look of the judge. And there on the witness stand, Cyprian, sitting with a crisp white shirt impeccably rolled up, his face tilted in perfectly feigned sorrow. "I loved my wife, Your Honor." Cyprian's voice had trembled then, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "But I cannot justify her actions. She pushed Azura out of jealousy. She killed our future child." Then there was Azura, Cyprian's personal assistant and mistress, sitting in a wheelchair. Her pale face, free of makeup, deliberately styled to look pitiful as she clutched her flat stomach. Crocodile tears rolled down her cheeks as she pointed a trembling finger at Zariah. Mrs. Vance screamed that I was a whore. Then she pushed me down the stairs. I felt the blood flowing. Lies. It was all a lie. That day, Zariah had indeed gone to Cyprian's office to demand an explanation for the infidelity she had discovered, but she never touched Azura. It was Azura who had hysterically stepped back and slipped, or perhaps threw herself on purpose, down the emergency stairwell, which was covered by only one security camera. The footage from that camera strangely became corrupted during the crucial minutes, leaving only the image of Zariah at the top of the stairs with an enraged face. 2 years. A felony conviction for aggravated assault resulting in the death of a fetus. When the judge's gavel struck, Zariah's world collapsed. She saw Cyprian hug Azura, comforting that viper. But in that embrace, Zariah caught a split second where Cyprian looked at her. Not with guilt, but with a cold, calculating gaze, the look of someone who had just eliminated the only obstacle to a multi-million-dollar inheritance. "Zariah, you daydreaming again?" A raspy voice snapped her out of her trance. It was Ophelia, her cellmate, an older woman imprisoned for a pyramid scheme. Zariah turned with a neutral expression. During these 2 years, she had learned to shut off her emotions. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in this place. "Just counting, Ophelia," Zariah replied quietly. "Tomorrow you walk free. If I were you, I'd be thanking the Lord until I had a bump on my forehead." Ophelia laughed as she folded her inmate uniform. "But you're strange, Zari. You're too calm, like someone going grocery shopping, not someone walking out of hell." Zariah sketched a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Because the real hell isn't here, Ophelia. The real hell is out there waiting for me." Zariah stood up, smoothing her blanket. "And this time, I'll be the one holding the fire." 10:00 a.m., visitation hours. The sound of the correctional officer's heavy boots echoed down the block's hallway. Normally, this was the time inmates anticipated the most. The hope of receiving a package from a relative, or simply seeing their children's faces. But for Zariah, this hour was a test of patience. "Zariah Vance, you have a visitor!" The officer, a burly woman, shouted from the other side of the bars. Zariah didn't move from her position, reading a book in the corner of the cell. She didn't even lift her head. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Who do you think? Your faithful husband and his young lady, the officer sneered. Despite her toughness, the woman felt a certain sympathy for Zariah. The whole prison knew how diligent Cyprian and Azura were with their visits. To an outsider, it looked like an act of responsibility and forgiveness, but the officers who often watched their interactions knew something didn't add up. "Tell them I'm sick, or dead, whatever," Zariah replied coldly, turning the page of her book. "Zari," whispered Ophelia, "it's the last month. Tomorrow, you leave. Why not see them one last time? Maybe they brought some money." Zariah slammed the book shut. "I don't need their money, Ophelia. Besides, they don't come to give. They come to take." The officer sighed. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Mercer says it's urgent. He says it's about your late parents' assets that are going to be seized if you don't sign today. He's brought a notary." Zariah laughed. A dry, cutting sound. "Tell the Honorable Mr. Mercer," Zariah said, staring intently at the officer, "that my hands are cramped. I haven't been able to hold a pen in 2 years because I've been too busy scrubbing inmates' laundry. If my father's assets are seized, so be it. Let it all burn." The officer shook her head, surrendering. "You are incredibly stubborn. All right. I'll tell him you refuse to see them again." When the officer left, Zariah leaned her back against the cold wall. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from contained rage. Every month, for 24 months, Cyprian and Azura had come. At first, they arrived with sweetness, bringing good food, pretending to want reconciliation. Cyprian claimed he was forced to press charges due to public pressure and Azura's family, but Zariah knew that a week after her imprisonment, Cyprian tried to liquidate a fixed-term deposit in Zariah's father's name worth $3 million. The bank refused because it needed Zariah's signature as the sole heir. From that moment on, their visits turned into psychological terror. Cyprian begged, then threatened. Azura cried, then mocked. They needed that signature. Cyprian's business empire, which looked magnificent, was actually rotting from the inside. His main capital had always come from fund injections from Zariah's father. Without Zariah, Cyprian was nothing more than the captain of a sinking ship. "Just wait," Zariah whispered to the void. "You won't have my signature, you'll have me." In the air-conditioned visitation room, Cyprian Mercer loosened his tie abruptly. Cold sweat beaded on his temples. "She refused again?" Cyprian asked, almost shouting, when the officer returned alone. The officer nodded indifferently. "She says her hands are cramped, sir. She can't sign." "That crazy woman!" Azura, sitting next to Cyprian, slammed her Hermes bag onto the table. "She's doing it on purpose. She knows the company audit starts tomorrow. If we can't liquidate her father's trust fund today to cover the hole in the balance sheet, we are finished." Cyprian massaged the bridge of his nose, which was throbbing. His face, usually handsome, now looked older than his 35 years. The last 2 years had been a logistical nightmare for him. He thought getting rid of Zariah would make things easier. Zariah was a homebody, submissive, or so he believed. He thought throwing her in prison would break her spirit, making her sign anything in exchange for early release or better conditions. But the Zariah in prison had turned into a rock. She refused sentence reductions, refused privileges, and worst of all, refused to yield power over the assets of her father, Reginald Vance. Even though Cyprian already controlled the operations of his father-in-law's company, without legal ownership of the shares, he couldn't leverage the vital assets to get new loans. "Calm down, Azura. Don't shout here," Cyprian hissed. "You asked me to calm down? Are you kidding me?" Azura glared at him, her beautiful face distorted by panic. "The developers of the Skyview project are already claiming the third payment. If we don't pay next week, the project halts, and the media will smell the carrion. Cyprian, and remember, tomorrow she walks free." Those words hung in the air like poison. Tomorrow she walks free. So, what if she walks free? Cyprian tried to sound confident, though his heart wavered. She's just an ex-con. Who's going to believe her? Her reputation is destroyed. The label of baby killer will haunt her forever. We'll pick her up tomorrow. We'll take her home, lock her up. We'll pump her full of sedatives until she signs. Are you sure? Azura looked at him doubtfully. She's been silent for 2 years, Cyprian. Her silence is scary. She's never made a scene. She's never begged. She simply refused. She has no one, Azura. Her father is dead. Her fortune is blocked. Her high society friends have abandoned her. She'll walk out of here destitute if we don't take her in. Cyprian struggled to convince himself. Cyprian stood up, adjusting his jacket. Let's go home. Let's prepare the script for tomorrow. Call the journalists. We'll create the narrative that we are a compassionate family welcoming back the wayward wife. That way, if she tries anything, the public will think she's ungrateful. Azura huffed but followed Cyprian. As they walked toward the black Cadillac awaiting them, they didn't realize that their seemingly perfect plan was hanging by a very thin thread about to snap. Night fell over the prison, bringing a chill that soaked into the bones. In the small library, rarely visited by other inmates, Zoraya sat opposite an older woman with short white hair. It was Octavia Graves, a famous former attorney imprisoned 5 years ago, used as a scapegoat in a corruption case involving a high-ranking official. Octavia was Zoraya's unofficial mentor inside. "Ready for tomorrow, child?" Octavia asked. Her voice was raspy but full of authority. Zoraya nodded. "Mentally, I'm ready, Octavia. But what about the documents?" Octavia smiled mysteriously, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a small contraband USB drive. "My protégé, Zaire, has everything secured on the outside," Octavia whispered. "He's brilliant, like I was in my youth. He tracked the flow of funds from Cyprian's company. Cyprian was careless. He used a shell company in Panama to launder money from the projects, but he put his mother's name as director. Amateur." Zoraya's eyes shone with coldness. "And Azura's medical proof?" "Safe," Octavia replied. Zaire managed to get close to the nurse who attended to Azura. Turns out the nurse kept a copy of the original medical record that wasn't destroyed. Azura suffered a miscarriage 2 days before the stair incident due to an overdose of illegal diet pills. She was already bleeding when she left the house. Zoraya clenched her fists under the table. The truth was painful, but also liberating. She had never killed anyone. The guilt that had tormented her in the first months vanished without a trace, replaced by the embers of a vengeance burning bright. "Thank you, Octavia. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Zoraya's voice trembled. Octavia patted her hand. "Pay me by winning, Zoraya. Win for all of us, the ones silenced by arrogant men and a corrupt system. When you walk out of here, you will no longer be the naive Zoraya. You will be the CEO of your own life." Octavia leaned in. "Remember our strategy. Don't attack directly. Let them feel superior first. Let Cyprian think he still has control. When he lowers his guard, when he feels safe on his throne, then you pull the rug out from under his feet." "First step, asset freeze," Zoraya murmured, repeating the plan they had mapped out for months. "Exactly," Octavia nodded. "Based on your father's original will, the one you left in a safety deposit box at another bank, which luckily Cyprian didn't know about, you have absolute veto power. As soon as you get out and activate your status with the board of directors, every cent that leaves the company accounts will need your approval." Zoraya imagined Cyprian's face when his credit card was declined. A faint smile returned to her lips. "One more thing," Octavia added with a serious face. "Be careful. Cyprian is cunning, but Azura is reckless. Desperate people do crazy things." "I already died once. 2 years ago, Octavia," Zoraya replied calmly. "They can't kill someone who is already dead." On her last night, Zoraya couldn't sleep. She spent it packing her few belongings, some books, a toothbrush, a change of clothes she wore when she came in, and a small crumpled photo of her father. She distributed the rest of her soap, shampoo, and some food among her cellmates. An emotional atmosphere enveloped cell number 12. "Don't forget about us, huh, Zari?" said Ophelia, with teary eyes. "I won't," Zoraya promised. I'll come back.